straight to the topic.
Just jump right in.
Yeah, inheriting a disadvantage.
Mm.
You probably notice I have the disadvantage of having paint all over my fingers.
It's well worth it. like you
Work's
earn
done.
the right to have that paint. Right?
Yeah, I was doing some painting.
Hard work.
Some of the playground and stuff for our school. But man, I wanted to bring this topic up because you shared a story about your family dynamics. I did the same thing, but what really struck a chord with me, Brian, is your story with your mother.
Yeah.
But you know, we all have a story. We all have a past. We all have skeletons in our closets, if you will. But this in particular, I'm thinking like in our day and age, and we've seen it in the media, we've seen it in several different type of platforms,
Yeah.
where there's this message that's been passed on. Doesn't sound too encouraging. And matter of fact, it seems like they're projecting all the disadvantages that they're facing, not to deny what they're facing.
Yeah.
But it's also like, seems like they're dwelling so much in the problem that they can't see a solution.
Yeah. I mean, where your attention goes, your energy flows, right?
Yeah, that's real, man.
So quick story, a young dude that I mentor, he said to me the other day, man, and I mean young, he's 25 years old.
Yeah.
He's like, man, I wish I didn't buy into the lie that life is easy, you know, that the comfort zone was the place that I was supposed to be, you know, that we're spending our time to get to a place of relaxation and comfort. And I was like, man, that's interesting. And we came to that because I was asking him, hey, what are you doing lately? You know, like, what are you doing when you get off work? Video games, YouTube, but he want to start a business.
Oh,
But he's spending most of his time playing video games and watching YouTube.
yeah.
What books have you read? Well, I'm reading this book, but it's been 2 months since I last picked it up. Right?
That sounds like a norm too these days.
But I appreciate the fact that he said, man, you know, I've bought into a lie.
Wow.
Right? Because most people don't realize that they've bought into a lie. You know, yeah, we want the comforts of life, right? We want the joys of life, the riches of life. But in the beginning, it's not going to be comfortable, you know?
Man.
And what we've inherited from generations before us is, you know, these same lies that, hey, you're after comfort, you're after relaxation. And nobody tells you that that fruit begins as a seed. And where it goes isn't comfortable. There's a lot of dirt, there's a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
there's some dark, you know, there's no light.
I heard someone say this: with every intention comes disruption. Have you heard of this? It's like a principle. So if you have an intention or you have a dream to achieve, goals to accomplish, it always comes with disruption.
Yeah.
So there's always the hard end, always typically at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the let's say the easier phase is coming on the back end. And I think that principle in itself, kind of like what you alluded to, and I love the fact that he came to the realization of, I bought into a lie.
Yeah.
How much weight
Yeah.
do you feel when you feel like, okay, I've been bought into a lie. How did I fall for this? I felt the same way, especially with this topic, inheriting a disadvantage. I thought about like, okay, why is it that I'm at close to my 40s? I'm almost 40, which is crazy. And I'm now understanding how the economy works. I'm understanding how what is financial literacy.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know what that was until like 4 or 5 years ago. Truly understanding. And it was all because I read this one book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. When I read that book, I couldn't get my eyes off it. And I knew that I was born into a lie after I read that book.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love the philosophy in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's not a book that I read until after I started my business. Like, so people was telling me, man, you ever read this book, man? You need to read this book because you're doing a lot of the things and you're saying a lot of the things that was in this book.
Principles.
So principles. It took me a minute to pick the book up because I felt like, okay, if everybody's telling me what I'm doing is in this book, why should I read the book? But I read it anyway, and it's an awesome book, man.
It is.
It
It
is.
really revolutionized my life, especially when I didn't have a dad growing up. It's about two dads.
And here's the thing. I tell people my disadvantage was my advantage. The fact that I didn't have a dad, you know, and shout out to great dads, you know.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be a great dad. I know you're a great dad, and I know a lot of awesome dads out here.
We honor you, yeah.
And I wish everybody was a great dad, or every father was a great father. That would be the ideal world.
Yeah.
But when I say that my disadvantage, and this is just my perspective, my disadvantage of not having a dad was my advantage, because I didn't have any, bad things poured into me.
Right.
I didn't have any bad ideas, ideologies, concretely set into my psyche. I had to figure it all out.
Wow.
Not having a dad is definitely a disadvantage, right? But my advantage is I didn't have to do 15, 20, 30 years of bad teaching, bad habits, and so forth.
I think the disadvantage of not having fathers around is the disadvantage of neglect.
And definitely. Neglect is an abuse.
It is an abuse. And I'm thinking about like just us as human beings, we typically forget that we're like a garden. We're like a garden. Essentially what that means is like a garden needs seeds to be planted, needs to be watered, and there's got to be growth in that process.
And I don't even think we're like a garden. Like we are a garden.
We are a garden.
Like we're literally a seed. At some point, you were a seed in your father that was planted into your mom.
Yeah, that's a good point.
9 months that seed incubated. That seed, you were the fruit that was birthed from that seed. And now you're going to repeat the process. And you've already repeated the process twice already with your two children,
babies.
Right?
Let's go.
Yeah, so we are a garden.
And I think with the topic of itself, inheriting a disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
There was an inheritance.
Yeah.
A lot of our issues and problems, and I think we've spoken about this before, where a lot of it's been passed down.
Yeah.
It's been inherited. Now, it's not to bring shame or guilt on the generations before us, but it's like we're all leveling up. We're all we all raise to the level of our ignorance.
Yeah.
So it's like, and this is what's interesting, Brian, because I know there are some demographics out there, especially with religions and, belief systems, worldviews, with the mindset of you're not going to know everything, but there are some things you need to know though. So that's like, there's no line that kind of creates this boundary of like, well, this is it. This is as far as you go. You know what I mean? Because everyone's different. Everyone experiences life different. People have different intelligences. So when it comes to like inheritance, right? They only knew what they knew.
You only know what you know.
You only know what you know. So then what is it that we need to do to know what we need in order to level up to where we need to be?
I love how you got this saying, fail forward. You say it all the time. Most people are stuck where they are in their ignorance. It's the fear of failure. Yep, the fear of failure. You have to try. You have to be willing to take risks.
Yeah.
There is no in between.
Yeah.
Either you're striving to do better, become better, or you're content with where you are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being content.
Yeah.
If you're happy. The end game is happiness, it's peace, it's purpose in who you are and who you feel you're called to be.
Yeah.
And if you found that, then more to it, more power to it. But if there's a sense of content and resistance and resentment for who you are and what you're doing, you got to be willing to take risks and fail forward.
So what you're saying right now, and I've heard this from, I was actually at a youth group hangout last night, and one of the young men, 12th graders, was saying, your life has to have a standard. And everything you said there was a standard, right?
Awesome.
But what does a life look like without a standard, though? It's chaos.
It's chaotic.
There's no boundaries. I was going to say, without boundaries, essentially.
Yeah.
So when this inheritance was passed down to us, right? For example, our story, the disadvantage that many people would think is I didn't have a dad. The family dynamic or nucleus wasn't clear. It wasn't defined properly. Hence why I had a lot of like rebellious.
Yeah.
There was a rebellious part of me that kind of, because I was looking for these answers and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
But you said something that was powerful. You said your disadvantage became an advantage now. That all comes from perspective though.
Totally perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. The life we live is pretty much a reflection of the eyes that we see through. Because two people can be looking at the same situation, the same scenario, and have a completely different outcome. We talked about it not long ago about the inner voice. Like the most important conversation that you could have on a daily basis is the conversation that you have with yourself. Am I strong enough? Am I capable? Is this this situation bigger than me?
That's good.
Like, what are my possibilities? What are my outcomes? One of the things we like to say is, I don't have to do something. I get to do something. It's an honor to be able to
set the course.
Yeah,
I love that.
To be the thermostat, not the thermometer. To be able to judge the temperature, create the temperature, and change the temperature in the room. We talk about time, and what is time? It's a resource. It's valuable. You can either spend it, waste it, or invest it. A lot of people say things like, I don't have enough time to do X, Y, and Z. And some people say to themselves, man, I'm blessed to have the time that I have to do the things that I'm called to do.
You're starting to hit on some of the things I want to talk about here today, Brian, because I remember there was a point in time in my life where I had a job and I'm like, why the heck am I here? Why did I choose this job? So I'm questioning all my decision making. But I was like, at one point there, I was embracing it. I was like, well, you know what? I made the decision now. Let's just just be grateful. I'm getting paid well. Yeah, this leader is a douchebag. But it's like, I changed my perspective. It's like, okay, what can I be grateful for? And then I started realizing, man, there was opportunities all around me.
Yeah.
I started realizing it. The people that I was meeting, my coworkers, the complaints and the gripes, which allowed us to create this podcast, because a lot of what people are facing, the problems, right? Yeah. Pain, problems, aspirations, issues, and needs. Everyone has them.
Yeah.
And we're exposing them and figuring out where's the solution. We can find a solution somewhere in these things.
Yeah.
Every problem has a solution.
When we have problems, we typically don't solve the problem by changing our place of employment or our environment. Usually we carry those problems with us because we're the problem.
That's real, dude.
Right? It's the perspective. It's not the problem. It's the perspective. Everybody's dealing with the same problems. The outcome is going to be different based on the perspective that the person is having of the problem. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was about 21, and I was just sharing this with my son, my 11-year-old the other day. I was 21, and I was working at a grocery store as a mascot. It was horrible.
I didn't know that.
I know. Most people don't, right?
No, a lot of people do now.
And I had a kid, 19.
Wow.
I had a 2-year-old kid. I was working at a grocery store as a mascot and an overnight stock person, making like $5 an hour.
Eesh.
Here's the crazy thing, though. I had made peace with that. A few months prior to that, I was unemployed. I was collecting unemployment, and it was very stressful. His mom at the time, she was receiving federal assistance, so she would give me the food supplement to buy grocery for him, and yeah, man, it was crazy. I had accepted the fact that where I was at.
Yeah,
my coworkers were young. I was young. We were cool. We were having a great time. And about 2 months into that position, I got a phone call from a company that changed my life. It's the same job that brought me down here to Texas. Huh. The fact that I was, I found peace with where I was. It's like a whole world just opened up, man. I found peace with where I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a powerful statement, because those who are like, you and I, we've, walked through the different highs and lows of life.
And there's much more to that story that I'm
sure.
leaving out. Yeah.
And the fact that you are at peace. Okay, look, let's just start from here.
Yeah.
And build from here. Because I think with inheriting a disadvantage, right? Because it had nothing, at some point, it didn't have anything to do with us. It was just given to us, really. It had nothing to do with us, but it was given to us.
So I've told you my dad theory, right? The DAD.
Yes. If you can refresh our brain on that one.
And so we have 2 words for earthly father. We have father.
That figure, yeah.
That figure, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have dad. Like for me, it's like, what does dad really mean? Because when we think scripturally, we think of father. You know, in the Bible, it's father, father, father. It's never dad. You know, where did dad come
Where did
from?
that know? Yeah.
And you know, I've played around with this, and dad, DAD. For me, it's doing as they did. You know, it's a visual, physical representation of doing what the person before us did.
Wow.
You know, and we keep repeating these cycles. So for us who have a dad, you know, there's an expectation that you're going to be like your father. You know, you're going to do as he did. You're going to inherit his traits, attitudes, abilities, advantages, disadvantages, and things like that.
You know what's interesting about that? That's a principle in itself. 85% of leadership development is through visual stimulus. This is kind of in the vein of the topic and in vein what you just said. My son, he's 4. My daughter is 3. My wife and I, have noticed how my daughter would watch her brother.
Okay.
And literally do everything he does. Everything. Mimics everything.
Okay.
To where, okay, at some point we're going to, because we were, you know, we had a homeschool, right? Homeschool setting, daycare in the home. And her mannerisms were like his. Now, she's typically extroverted.
Okay.
He's an introvert, like me.
Okay.
Quiet, reserved, observant. Now, you may not see too much of the quietness now, but it's because I'm really, you know, growing in that area.
Yeah.
But because she's so extroverted, my wife would notice how she would act introverted because my son was like that or her brother is like that. So she was acting out of her own natural state because she's mimicking what's in front of her. She's just like mirroring everything her brother's doing to a degree where she's playing the same toys as what he's playing with.
Okay.
Monster trucks and all the boys' toys. And I was telling my son the other day, I was like, hey, because he wanted me to buy a toy for her. We went on like a daddy-son date, father-son date.
Okay.
And bought him a toy. He's like, but I want to buy my sister a toy too. I'm like, no, your mother's going to buy your sister a toy.
Okay.
So I wanted to like split the two. Hey, like she's going to have her own toys and you play with your toys. I know you're sharing right now and I know you want her to play with monster trucks and all the boy stuff. She has to go buy some princess stuff. So I'm saying that to say
so
visual stimulus. Yeah.
So do you think he was trying to buy her a boy toy?
I think
or
I think he's so smart.
Posture?
He's so smart like his dad, like his father. Doing as they did. He's so smart to where I want to buy Lolo a toy so I can play with it. It's really his toy because it's a boy toy. And she gets over it really quick. And I'm like, you're so smart.
That is slick. Because see, I was thinking the heart posture. Right?
Hey, these kids.
That's a good one, man. That's slick. I like
it. Now, I know this sounds very biased. He's very intelligent.
No, he really is.
That kid
he's a little genius, man.
Has sales skills. Like, and it's at this point where it's manipulative. It's not leadership. We're working on that, where he's like literally having a negotiation process with us,
bro. So you know, I always refer to scripture when I'm talking to Lil B, right? And you know, I hit him with the, hey, you know, you got to pray because if you want something, you have to ask for it, and you have not because you ask not. So when I don't want to give him something, but I asked for it, I don't have it.
I gotcha.
and he keeps asking, and it becomes nagging, right?
You know, it's really cool, and this hits the nail on the head here with inheriting a disadvantage, and I'm so glad I'm passing this on to my son.
There we go.
He was wearing a Batman costume at the playground.
Okay.
And he asked the question to both my wife and I. He's like, Dad, now Dad's marked me, man. I can't even think different on that. He's like, Dad, why is Batman Batman? Like, why did he use a bat as his symbol? And I was like, oof, it's one of those days, huh?
That's great.
And I kind of, you know, gave him a capsulated version of Batman, right? I was like, well, son, there was this man. His name is Bruce Wayne. He overcame his fear of bats by embracing that fear. That's why he's using that symbol. You know what's happening now, man? After that story, we would leverage that story now. He is fearful of thunder and lightning. And like I'm talking like he shakes, he cries, all the things. He's trying to find his mommy and daddy and all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Just recently, there was lightning and thunder in Dallas, Texas. And he's like, he walks and it's going off loud, man. Lights, like lightning. And you know it's coming with the thunder. Yeah. And I would hear, I was like, hey, Dad, I'm overcoming fear.
Quit it.
Oh, dude, I was like, oh, wow. That's how powerful this is.
It's amazing, right? He's acknowledging that there is fear.
Yep.
But what am I doing with it? Right? That's awesome.
There were several times, like one of the dogs kept like nipping at him a little bit. And, you know, kind of, that will give you some trauma, of course. So he's like kind of a little bit skittish with dogs. But then there was a moment there. He kind of just went, you know what? I'm done. These dogs are cute. I'm going to pat him. So he goes, pats the dog, and he goes, Dad, look, I'm overcoming fear. Like it's becoming a thing now. So it's so cool at 4 years old, man.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. So I'm loving the fact that I'm able to inherit in him an advantage.
That's good. I had this incident where we had our next door neighbor, had a pit bull that they used to let run loose.
Oh gosh.
And
I don't like those dogs.
I know, right? We were new to the neighborhood.
Oh no.
And this dog used to run loose around the neighborhood, man. It was crazy. And I walked out the house one day. Unexpectedly.
I see this in my head.
Yeah.
I see this in my head.
I got the video. I got it on.
Oh, you got a video?
I got it on Ring. Because it just caught me off guard. I'm just walking. And I look up and she right behind me. I'm like, oh, snap. She on me. And I didn't know what to do. So I just looked like, hey, girl, what's up? You know? And come to find out she's super friendly.
Okay.
Super friendly.
You just
I'll show you the video. It's awesome, man.
Please, we got to put it on
because you could tell when I was scared. I was like, oh, snap. Hey, what's up?
You got to share that video.
So I'm like, come on. And she started following me. I'm like, okay, we good. She's not going to bite me. And my son, he was scared to go outside and play because you never knew where she was. But once I showed him this video, he was like, oh, okay, right? But it literally caught me being off guard, right? To show him that, hey, you know, your fears are things that you can overcome.
It's interesting, man, because, you know, dogs, man. I was doing a little bit of study on dog training and how closely related it is to human training.
Bro, I seen a video of a dog doing CPR on a cop.
Like the paws?
Jumping up and down, front paws.
Holy smoke.
And then it would put its face on the neck to see if it had a pulse.
What?
That's crazy.
We need to put that video up on the screen because I don't believe that.
I know, it's wild.
Holy moly. So I'm saying that to say we're not dogs. That's creation. We're creators. But there are some things that I think messages are passed on through creation. Like you look at a tree, you know, it's trying to teach you something.
Big time.
You look at water, it's trying to teach. A dog. I look at a dog, right? We've got two of them that we're kind of dog sitting right now. And doing some study on dogs, like the first few months of this puppy's life is so pivotal because it literally sets the trajectory of this dog's lifespan and how it behaves.
Yeah.
You can't, what's the saying? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I've heard that's debunked. Like you can, but it takes a little longer.
Yeah. You know, I say it's easier to train a child than it is to change an adult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say that one more time.
It's easy to train a child than it is to change an adult.
Which is the same principle with dogs.
I heard it said like this also, that the first, I believe, 5 to 6 years, and it may not even be that long. It may be the first 3 years.
First 3 years, yeah.
Of a child's experience will have more effect than, you know, the next 20 years.
That's crazy.
You know, so if a child is abused for the first, let's just say 5 years, right? And then they spend the next 20 years, so age 25, in comfort, those 5 years will still have an effect over them versus if they spent the first 5 years in comfort and security, and then they spent the next 20 in abuse and neglect and insecurity, they have a better chance of overcoming those hardships.
I wonder if that's the body, soul, where it's self-regulating because it's that first few years of it's the body and the child It's self-regulating, so it probably reverts back to that safety.
To what it knows.
Yeah, what it knows. Yeah, which I feel like that's innate in
it's
our
like the
human
immediate download.
Correct.
The first 5 years, immediate download. Right now, everything that comes after the immediate download has to stack itself up, prove itself against what I already know.
And we use words like foundation.
Yeah, foundation.
Yeah, foundational truths. Wow, that's super interesting. So I'm thinking with like, as we talk about inheriting a disadvantage, as it is passed down, you also got to ask yourself the question, with every inheritance, you can also be a little critical, or critical thinking needs to come into place. Why am I thinking this way? Why am I doing it like this? Traditions, you mentioned that a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like, just because it's a tradition doesn't mean it actually deserves or demands, I would say. It's like a vacuum. Every tradition needs to be analyzed. Yeah. Needs to be. Or else then you're like, how do you know it's actually not working?
Yeah.
And you're doing something that doesn't work.
Yeah. And there's traditions in everything. So culture, right? Let's talk about culture.
Yeah.
Every environment has a culture.
Yeah.
Right? Your home environment, what are your expectations? What is your standards? What are your family values?
Yeah.
That in itself is a culture. Then your child goes off to school. That environment has a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Then you as a parent, let's say you both have separate careers.
Yeah.
You're going into two separate environments that have two separate cultures, right? So how do those things clash when you come back together as one, as a family at home?
That's real.
Right? I don't think these are things that we
don't talk about
that we talk about. We don't even analyze them or think that they exist, right?
It's too much work.
These are not even that it's work. I don't think we've thought about the fact that cultures exist in these different environments.
Well, you got to think about it this way, Brian.
and my advantage is this.
Go ahead.
We homeschool and we work together.
Yeah, and you've come.
So I get to see that there is a culture that exists in all these different areas, whereas most folks, it's just normal. I go to work, she go to work, he go to school.
Here's the principle. Thinking is the most hardest thing that most people don't do.
Yeah, it's the truth, man.
Our actions are based on our thought life.
Yeah.
Our behaviors. We forget that our thought life and our deeds have everything to do with our decision making.
All of it. And it starts with the inner voice.
Yes. If we're not aware of it. Inner voice, I would even say with just the school, because I've been, let me just say it like this. I've been studying our clients' problem more than they have.
What's their problem?
The problem is the prestigious colleges, the private entities, I'm not going to say the full word because it will probably get shut out, private entities that are out there that call themselves educational institutions. Let's just keep it at that. But what I'm seeing on the back end of this is they're ill-equipped. Students are ill-equipped. They have no idea about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea about principles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll probably figure out how things work and things that don't work. But if you don't live your life through principles, now I'm not saying your whole life has to be centered around that, but a lot of people live their lives through personalities rather than principles. And the problem is they find themselves in this void they can't get out of.
Personalities. Yeah, it reminds me about, so.
And not that personalities are not important.
Personalities.
That's part of the journey.
Hopefully your personality is structured on foundational character, right?
Yes,
like
sir.
Foundational characteristics.
Yeah.
Like a good character. Like, what do you believe? What are your thoughts? You know, like what's important? What do you value? Good values, a good moral compass, right?
Yeah, I like
because
that.
if your character isn't built on those principles, those structures, then you're creating a character, this false identity of who you want to be perceived as, like who you want people to think you are versus who you truly are.
Wow.
You know, your authentic self.
It's kind of like my daughter.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about
my son,
because when we talk about character, a lot of people are characters. They're not who they truly are. Like the person that you see in public is not the same person in private. The language changed, the attitude changed, right? The disciplines change.
Interesting.
You know,
I like that because Dr. Martin Luther King would say it's the content of your character, right? characters, but they don't have content. They lack content.
Yeah.
The substance that actually holds up the character that you're projecting out there. I wanted to put in some points here. There's this book by Edward B. Berger, or Berger, if you're from Australia. And one of the points here that I really think we need to hit on here when it comes to inheriting the disadvantages, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Point number 5 I see here is master the art of making connections. Let me say that one time. Master the art of making connections. He says here, the book emphasizes the power of making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts and ideas. It encourages readers to explore the intersections and overlaps between different areas of knowledge to foster creativity and generate new insights. And reverting back to the how we experience life, right, the right way. Mm-hmm. Some of the concepts that we brought up there was from Jim Quick. He said that some of those areas of our lives like that damages our brain. Some of the factors, right, that damages our brain. He mentioned that if we're living in our comfort zones, if we're constantly living in a state of no challenges and no hardships, it's damaging your brain. So going back to this master art of making connections. Now, they may not be connections to everything. It may not come right there in that moment because you probably don't even have the mental bandwidth of trying to make the connections. Yeah. I'm saying that to say, and I'll kind of revert back to correcting what I said. Right. There is a connection, in everything, but you may not find it in that moment. Exactly. It's coming later. Yeah.
Yeah. And it may not be to your point, it's coming later. It may not be it may not be to your advantage, or there may not be a need for you to make a connection in that moment. You just may need to have that experience, because it goes back to seed planting. Like everything matters. Like nothing is for naught.
Yeah.
If you're lazy in a season, you're gonna learn the lesson of what laziness brings, right? So I like to live a life of. I like to say, when I look back, I want to have lived a life of no regrets.
Yeah.
Even if I screw up. And I've started businesses that have failed. And from that, I've learned the lesson of what to do, what not to do.
Yeah.
Right. But the fact that I took that step, and the fact that it didn't work, I know what to do now. I'm better off now with the information that I have versus I would have been if I didn't, take that risk.
You grew up from your screw up.
I like it.
That just came to me.